Evening, everybody, and welcome to this regularly scheduled and the last planning board meeting of the year. Yay, Anne, we made it. Well, we think.
So far, so good.
So far, so good. We have a couple members of the public today, and we have some people Zooming in. So, Zooming in, we have April Cheriboga, we have Bruce White, and Hillary Koch. And we have Dave Johnson over here.
Hello.
I'm Samantha Burdick, Tom Dupre, and Uriah Pelletier. So, we'll get started.
Pledge of Allegiance.
Oh, thanks, Tom. Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So first on our agenda is approval of the minutes from the November 23rd meeting.
I'll make the motion.
Thanks, Tom. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Dave. And we'll do a roll call vote. So, April.
Yes.
Hillary.
Yes.
Bruce.
Yes.
Dave.
Yes.
I'm a yes. Tom.
Yes.
And Uriah.
Yes, I wasn't here for that meeting.
Oh, do you want? You can abstain if you
I'll
want.
abstain.
Okay. So 6 in favor, 1 abstention. Oh yes, that's when your sister was surprised you, right? Before
Yes.
Thanksgiving.
Yep, that's right.
The second item on the agenda is the disclosure of conflict of interest. Do any planning board members want to disclose any conflicts on votes that they might take tonight? Okay. So moving on, number 3. And this is a long paragraph. The City of Waterville is considering rezoning specified properties on College Avenue from Commercial C to Commercial C1 zone to allow apartments. Properties under construction for rezoning are all but 2 properties abutting the west side of College Ave from the south side of Maple Street to Broadway Street. Excluded properties are 68 and 110 College Ave. Review is in accordance with Section 7.1 of the zoning ordinance. Okay, Ann, take it away. I think we'll let you explain first.
Okay. This was proposed by the Housing Committee, and I expected that some of them might be here. I don't know if they're participating in some other way.
Are there any attendees on there?
Just Amy Calder.
Okay. Hi, Amy.
Don't see Amy, but anyway. No, that's Bruce. Ooh, that's Bruce. Okay. The Housing Committee wanted to allow housing in additional areas that are not currently, where they're not currently allowed. The Commercial C zone on College Avenue seemed like a good place to start because it's already a mixed-use area. There's a sidewalk all the way downtown, and there. Thank you. And we're talking about the west side of College Avenue. The west side of College Avenue abuts a residential area to the west. But the Housing Committee did not want to recommend that all the Commercial C zone allow apartments because the Commercial C zone is, for the most part, areas such as Airport Road. It's all commercial there. Along KMD, that's commercial. There's quite a bit of Commercial C zone throughout the city. It's all north of, around the airport, as I said, and north of there. But, David has the map up, but we're not seeing the whole city CC
No, that was
zone,
just the document that was.
Oh, I see. That's supposed to show the area that is proposed for rezoning. So anyway, rather than allow apartments in the CC zone, which would have been the absolute easiest way to go, we're proposing a commercial CC1 zone that allows apartments. It disallows certain zones that, certain uses that are allowed in the CC zone just because they're not currently in existence on that side of College Avenue, the west side of College Avenue.
Do you have any
For
examples?
example, veterinarians, Dr. Corwin's office used to be on College Avenue. He's moved to Washington Street. Sorry, I always get those confused. Let me pull this out. So I made a table that or Allie helped me do this, shows the commercial C zone versus the CC1 zone. It lists you can see the differences there. Let's see. So the CC1 permits all the commercial A and commercial B uses, and also apartments, which are not, as I said, not allowed in the CC zone. Off-street parking, we're proposing that the off-street parking requirement for apartments be the same as in the commercial A zone, which is one parking space per apartment. Dimensional requirements are no lot size, no minimum lot size, no frontage requirement, but a difference between the commercial C1 and the commercial C zone is that there was some interest in form-based zoning, which controls the look of development. So an expert in form-based zoning recommends requiring that buildings be set closer to the street, rather than you think of Shaw's Plaza or JFK Plaza or Elm Plaza. The buildings are all set way back from the street. So it's a different look. So obviously, wherever the buildings are already in existence, there's no requirement to move your building, obviously. But new development, that would apply to new development. If, say, you had a building that wasn't in good condition and you wanted to remove it, then it would have to be built within 20 feet of the street, the front property line. And the other requirement is that you plant trees. And obviously, if your building already is too close to the street, there's no space to put a tree there. You could make a donation, or you're required to make a donation into the city's tree fund that was recently established.
Okay.
So, and that would only be if you change the use of your property. For example, if you opted to convert part of your building to apartments.
Okay.
So I think that's pretty much hitting the highlights. Anybody has questions?
Dave.
And just off the top of your head, do you know if there's been any, in recent history, say the last few years, any proposed developments that maybe didn't get approved for one reason or the other in any of these places that would be changed, that because of the change would now not be able to be? Like, have there been any veterinary hospitals that somebody wanted to put in and it didn't get approved for whatever reason, maybe anything?
No.
Nothing, and nothing pending that we know of. And do you know if there's any pending projects that people want to do that this would allow them to do to meet the housing committee's goals?
Would you care to say anything, Mr. Mayor? No?
I'm just here to observe.
He's just here to observe.
What's up, Jay?
How you doing?
Good.
Okay. Well, Arthur Trammell is here. Would you
Yeah.
want to say?
We can open it up to members of the public if
Yes, my.
we have to have you come up
If
to
you don't mind.
And I had my shot, so I didn't need to.
It's okay.
Just hold your breath, Arthur.
Yes, I'm Arthur Trammell. I'm a lifelong resident of Waterville. My family recently had purchased the Manor Restaurant. And I am heavily into supplying housing within the city for the last 35 years. We have aspirations of helping the city with their shortage. So and we're working on plans now to make housing project. So ultimately, we're going to be in front of you asking permission. We're working on all of our homework now, so we're hoping that we could help. Yeah.
And so this rezoning would allow that project to go through?
It would. I'm not sure that it will have the density that you wanted. Do you know that yet, Arthur?
Well, we're hoping that we could fit as many units as we can. We have 3 properties that we're going to be dealing with, so
Okay.
we'd like to fit as many as we can. So we're certainly at the mercy of these changes, so it depends on how many they're going to allow us to make it financially,
Sure.
secure. Yeah. So,
Does anybody have any questions
any
for Arthur?
questions? I'll have a nice package at one point here, so we're working on that as we speak.
Thank you, Arthur.
Okay, you're
Yeah,
welcome.
thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Bruce.
Yes, okay.
Well, maybe, even if, maybe he doesn't have to answer it, Ann might be able to, or you could, are we saying without this approval, his project would not be able to go forward?
Well, his property is in the commercial C zone, which does not allow apartments. So, yeah, he needs rezoning. The question is, will this particular zone that we've proposed here, will that work for him, or will he need a higher density? But there are other properties along that strip that that could benefit from this rezoning as well. Obviously, that whole west side of College Avenue
Yeah.
Correct.
up to the pro moving.
And the housing committee has identified that this would be an area that we could increase housing.
So the housing committee is looking at other areas to rezone as well. It's just that I had to notify 124 property owners for this. So that I thought was plenty for at one time.
So, follow up then. Are there what would be the downside of us approving this, if there were any, I guess? That anybody can chime in or that you might be aware of, Ann?
Well, basically, we're just allowing apartments where they're not allowed now. The question is really whether anybody who wanted to put an apartment in would have any issue with the density requirement there. And I don't think it will be an issue for most people because they have existing buildings, and it's my understanding that Arthur plans to take down the Manor Restaurant.
That is correct. That is correct.
April?
Right, and
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Ann. I would just say that, Arthur, I appreciate you coming, and we've had a couple discussions, and we know you're very, have some good longevity in the city and in the North End. You've done a really great job of keeping things up, and we appreciate that. And
Thank
look
you for
forward to
noticing.
hearing from you in the future.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for noticing.
April?
I'm sorry, just a clarifying question. Are we talking about putting apartments abutting the train yard? Is that what I understand?
No, we're only talking about the west side of College Avenue at this point.
Okay.
Are you asking where Arthur's project, are you asking where the Manor Restaurant was?
That would be, I can look that up. That's not a problem. I was just looking on the map here. I see that, right, that's not going to be abutting the rail yard.
It's
here.
across the street from the
Okay.
railroad yard.
Right, and there are houses just on the right because it's residential B. Okay. Yep, that's all. Thank you.
Great. Do we have any other questions, comments from the public? Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Arthur.
Yeah, my name is Bill Bassford. I live in Ward 6. I'm just wondering, I was wondering why this is limited to the west side of College Avenue, but I think maybe Ann mentioned that, the number of letters that are required to be sent out and so forth. So are there any planned timeline for when you might make this change on the east side of College Avenue as well? Or perhaps down on Water Street, which could use some new housing to replace some of the old housing down there? Just as an example, there are about 350 jobs in the Hathaway building, but directly across the street there's a vacant lot. And currently that is zoned commercial only, so no new housing is allowed on that lot. So that would be a good part of the city to make similar changes to allow housing down there, or at least mixed-use buildings. And I guess that's enough for now.
And is the reason why we focused on the 1/2, is that what the council sent us, or do we?
I can't remember the exact.
It was the sidewalk, right? Was the big reason?
Oh, well,
Oh.
yes, and the fact that it's residential behind,
Okay.
to the west.
I guess to answer your question, the council would have to send us a request in order to rezone any other areas. So we can only look at zoning that the council sends us, and then we send it back to them to vote on.
Can you make recommendations to them?
Yeah,
Well,
we could.
I assume the housing committee will make
Yeah.
more recommendations, so. Anyway, just a little bit at a time. So another thing you have to consider is the Commercial C strip on the east side of College Avenue is 200 feet from the center line of College Avenue. So this is a little more complicated in that you have properties right along College Avenue, which are the ones that we were focusing on. But then there's some other pieces, some small pieces, not all the way along, but on some parts of the strip. There are other pieces in between those that are on College Avenue that are still in the commercial C zone. And then there are pieces behind that that are in 2 zones, residential B or residential C, depending on where they are on the strip, and commercial C. So I've only heard from half a dozen people as to their thoughts on rezoning their own property. So I certainly wouldn't want to rush this, and because I just haven't heard from anyone. I expected to hear from some people tonight.
Jay?
So full disclosure, my family owns one of the buildings that is in this C zone, one that I plan to turn into units, rental units. At some point, you have to look at the east, at the other side. If you look where our building is, Grub, to the right of us is the barber parlor. There's a little IT place there, R&B Electronics. Upstairs from them, they already have apartments. Above Grub, there is apartments. The downstairs will be turned into 2 more units. But if you look right across the street, many of you have been there, they're all apartment buildings. Every single one of them, yet they're zoned commercial C. Why they're there, maybe they were grandfathered in at some point in time, but there are certain blocks like that where that one across the street, that entire block could technically see this same zone. And I think anywhere in the city where we can find unique ways to create housing is only going to benefit us. Taking 2 units and making them into 1 unit and turning them into 2. In the crisis that we have, we've only got 13, 14 square miles. And to reinvest in the stock that we have and make it more efficient, but then you have to start building up. I mean, there's really nowhere else to go. I'm in favor of this zone. I was going to rezone my own property. I was looking for a commercial A. At some point, we plan to put another building behind our building. And this doesn't preclude us from doing so, so I am also in favor. That was it.
And the properties that Jay's referencing on the other side of the street, were those grandfathered in, or how does that?
Well, I
How did
think
that work?
what happened was years ago, people thought that College Avenue was going to be the big booming commercial area, and maybe it was at one point. So they assumed that perhaps some of these apartment buildings would disappear and become
Okay.
commercial uses.
And that didn't
Just
happen.
didn't happen.
Okay. Makes sense. Any other comments from the board? Yes, Dave.
I had one more question. The two properties that are being excluded, I think I know what 68 is. What is 110, the nursing home?
Hang on just a minute. Let me see.
What is 68?
110 College Avenue is the Brown House Commons, belongs to the, oh my goodness, Booker family. And it was a motel at one point, and then assisted living,
Okay.
and now it's apartments. So that is in a contract zone, and the only condition of the contract zone was a fence between that. So in other words, when it was a motel, it was a commercial use, and that was allowed in the commercial C zone. But when Mr. Booker wanted to convert it to apartments, he couldn't do that in the commercial C zone. So we rezoned it to commercial A, but with a contract, and that contract required him to put up a fence that he wouldn't otherwise have been required to install.
Is that on the map? Is that the one that has the black arrow pointing down to it?
Yes, I believe it is.
That's the contract
Myrtle Street,
zone,
just
contract
south of
A.
it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
That's 68, and what's 110?
that's 110.
Oh,
That's 110.
68 is where a marijuana shop is going in.
Okay.
And there's another marijuana shop up the street from that. So the marijuana uses are allowed through the marijuana ordinance, which is separate from the
Right.
zoning ordinance. So Sarah Cross, deputy clerk, had suggested that rather than leave those properties out of the rezoning to commercial CC1, rezone them, and then in the future they could be used for apartments, but add the CC1 zone to the marijuana ordinance.
Okay.
So it might be that the places with marijuana shops wouldn't need to be excluded from the rezoning if we revise the marijuana ordinance.
Okay.
Sure. Okay.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Yes. Oh, April, then Bruce.
We're only concerned currently though with the west side, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Bruce.
Yes, thank you. And the process will be recommending, obviously, to the council. Do we have to go through any, the comprehensive plan type thing, or,
Because this is not a
cross
contract
T's
zone.
and dot?
No,
What's
we
that?
don't.
I just
because-
want to make,
Yeah, this is not a contract zone.
okay, so I just wanted to clarify that because of all we went through the last few months. So good to clarify for the public as well. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'll make a motion, Ann, that we accept the commercial C1 zone. Makes sense to me, and sounds like it's in favor of, the housing committee is in favor of it.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Bruce. So we'll do a roll call. Hillary,
Yes.
April,
Yes.
Bruce,
Yes.
David?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Tom?
Yes.
And Uriah?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Who seconded?
Bruce?
Bruce, okay. Okay, so this is going to leave some properties in the CC zone between properties that are in two different zones and in the CC1 zone. So the map is going to be a little bit odd for a while, but I don't really know how you want to deal with that. Maybe we could go ahead and rezone the properties right on College Avenue and then let property owners ask to have their property rezoned one at a time, or I've never experienced such a big
Right.
change at once before, so I don't really know the best way to approach that. But the council has to vote twice, so it might be that Bill Lee would want to weigh in on this. Maybe I could try to contact some more property owners, and I guess I would want some advice from the board. Would it be all right with you if we added some more properties to this rezoning, abutting the ones that are already to be rezoned? And also at the same time, perhaps if property owners wanted this, they could ask to have their properties all in the residential zone as opposed to half in one and half in the other.
Yeah, I don't see a problem with that.
Anyone have an objection?
Do you have a
to-
question, Jay?
I'm not sure I quite understand what you're trying to say.
There's places along College Avenue where there's a commercial C piece and then another commercial C piece behind that, and then another piece that's half in the CC and half in the RB or half in the RC. And so what we're talking about now is just rezoning the parcels that are right on College Avenue. But that's going to, if you do rezone those, they'll be CC1, and then there'll be a small lot behind it, which is CC, and then, as I said, a piece that's in two different zones. So it's just going to be quite an odd map, but
Yeah, so
I guess
like,
it's.
I mean-
I guess in the beginning it would be unless that property owner decided to rezone that other piece of property. Sorry.
Okay, so that,
Right.
we could go that way.
I think we
just-
send it back just as it was sent to us, and if they want to amend it and send it back to us, they can.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay. And item number 4 on the agenda is recommendation to the city council concerning the adoption of the adaptive reuse and demolition delay ordinances and creating a historical preservation committee.
So, may I?
Sure.
Speak to this? Okay. So, at your last meeting, the board asked that Bill Lee review we had 3 different documents. It was a resolution that set up an historic preservation committee, a demolition or permit delay ordinance, and then an adaptive reuse ordinance that would allow buildings that were built for something other than residential use in residential zones to be used for a new use. Historic buildings that were listed on our historic property inventory, which we'll be creating with this historic preservation committee. So Bill suggested a few minor changes, but he was dismayed at the huge number of properties that could be considered for historic listing on this historic inventory. And the permit delay ordinance states that the permit could be delayed by as much as 90 days for any property that could be considered. And we had a date of 1930 is the cutoff date, so anything before 1930 could be held up. And so what I suggested today is just rein it way in and start out with allowing just properties that already have been placed on the inventory to be subject to the permit delay provisions. So presumably, the Historic Preservation Committee would continue to meet, and they might find other properties that they thought should be listed in the inventory. And the process, if you recall, is that the committee recommends the property to the city council, and the city council has to vote to add those properties to the inventory. So it just requires some minor changes to the language in those three documents, but it's a huge difference in the number of properties that would be subject to this permit delay provision.
Okay. Any comments from the board on this?
And I have a question. I think when we discussed this previously, we narrowed the parameters in the proposed ordinance, essentially restricted. There were potentially many properties would be included prior to 1930, but based on the restrictions, the limitations that we were proposing, that it would really only affect a much smaller number. It wouldn't be all the buildings. It would be, I'm trying to find it. It would be commercial use in residential zone, among other limitations. That it wouldn't be the full complement of buildings built before 1930.
Yeah, the way it was written, it actually did include anything built before 1930 could be delayed. The permit could be delayed.
Bruce. Bruce.
Yes, thank you. So I think I saw an email that the codes officer, Dan Bradstreet, also had some concerns. Is that correct, Dan?
Yes, he was horrified, as a matter of fact. Yeah, he said that his staff couldn't be involved in delaying permits for 90 days, and Bill Lee was concerned that people would lose their contractors if they had to wait. So again, the idea would be to change the language such that the Historic Property Committee recommends properties to the council, and it would only be those properties that are recommended to the council that might be subject to the permit delay if they want to add on or change the outside of the building or demolish the building for that matter. But then the Historic Property Committee would continue to meet and over time propose other properties to the council. So the list should grow over time, but initially it would be a very small list.
So, follow up on that. Do we feel that doing that would meet the concerns of our codes person? I mean, obviously that's a pretty important piece of this whole thing. If he doesn't feel he can support it for whatever reasons, do we think the changes, he would be okay with those?
Yeah, as the resolution is written now, there are only half a dozen or so properties that are actually, maybe it's a little bit more than maybe a dozen, properties that are on the National Register now, and those are recommended to be on the initial list.
Okay, and also, one of your emails today, and I don't know if you've already mentioned it, but we may take a little more time on this anyway tonight. Maybe would be just continuing to get some info and letting Bill Lee review a little bit more and then taking the vote at our next meeting. Is that correct?
Right. I don't see that there's any rush on this unless anybody on the board wants to try to push this through.
Do we?
Okay, I like the idea of taking our time and making sure we cross the T's and dot the I's. not, there could be some unintended consequences. So I really like the idea of taking it, a little, taking time to have Bill Lee look at it again, speak with the codes officer, etc. Thank you.
Dave?
Do we have to send all three of these to council at the same time? I mean, what is delaying us from sending the Historic Preservation Committee?
Well, that same language about looking at properties constructed before 1930 is in, I think, in all three of these documents.
Sure.
Let me just check to make sure.
It is.
Well, actually, basically, it says the committee will look at properties constructed prior to 1930.
Right.
So I guess you could send
mean,
this resolution, but I'm not sure that it really would help to send these separately, given that they're all so interrelated.
Well, it'd be great to get a committee formed, I would think.
I think by the time a committee got formed and we had applicants to it, and then they got nominated and approved, we'll probably have the other stuff ready by then. So if we can approve that one and send it.
We've also had so many conversations about it's impossible to write this ordinance if we don't have the committee that's told
Right.
us about the which buildings we're talking about. So it's like, which goes first, the chicken or the egg?
Oh, okay, so if you wanted to recommend that the council approve this resolution that establishes the committee, I would appreciate your postponing the other two into a date certain so that we don't have to re-advertise, pay for another legal notice.
Yeah.
And so the next meeting is February 11th. I'm sorry, January 11th.
Okay.
Well, and what I would propose to do is make those changes that I mentioned earlier, eliminate that pre-1930 language, and then run it by Bill Lee again before your next meeting.
Okay.
Could we just amend the language and remove the 1930 language? Do we have to, since that's the issue, could we just resolve that? Do we have to wait and run it by Bill Lee again? I mean,
It's up to you. He emailed and said, oh, we should be discussing all of these things. So I don't know if he has some other issue or not. I think that would satisfy, would fix the problem, but I don't know whether he does or not.
David?
Dave?
And my understanding too is you can do a lot to even I know a residential property because I've done it. You can do a lot to that without a permit. A house constructed whenever, you can replace all the siding, replace the windows, replace the doors. So without a permit.
Yeah,
That's
maintenance
good.
items are,
Right.
That's a good point.
So you can completely change the exterior of a residential building regardless of when it was built without a permit. So there would be no permit delay unless they were making, I forget, substantial structural changes, or and maybe it's any structural changes.
I think it is. I
But-
think it's adding walls, dividing rooms, things like that you would need a permit for.
Yeah.
Adding any structure, roofs or outbuilding additions.
So it's not like nobody would be able to do anything to their houses.
Right.
So.
So do we have a motion
Yeah.
I'll make the motion to strike the 1930 restriction.
on both of those two ordinances?
Yes, as Bill Lee recommended.
But are you recommending sending this on to the council with those changes, or just?
I would, yes.
Okay.
Okay, is there a second?
So I just want to make sure I understand. So now it would read, any application for a permit to demolish, move, or alter the exterior of a building or structure, and then strike out constructed prior to 1930?
Yes.
Or?
And the word, or, yes.
So
it just reads
listed.
listed in the
Yeah.
city's inventory, yeah. So that would be the change I'd make throughout.
I second that.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right, we'll do a roll call. April,
Yes.
Bruce,
No.
Hillary,
Yes.
Dave.
Yes.
I'm a yes. Tom
Yes.
and Uriah.
Yes.
Okay, that's it.
Okay, and that's all we had on our agenda, so I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Yay.
So moved.
Okay, thank you. And second by Dean.
Okay.
Have a great night.